Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Welcome to the second evening of the 2024 summer session. Our week-long session may be attended in person or online. We will have a 45-minute Dharma talk by our guest speaker, Reverend Dr. Kenji Akahoshi, and a Q&A followed by a 40-minute Dharma talk by Reverend Akahoshi and another Q&A session. We will open this evening's session with Dennis Tashiro from Windward Buddhist Temple, who will be our MC for this evening. Dennis?
Thank you, Carolyn. Good evening, everyone. Tonight's topic is truth, now and then. Our understanding of truth has expanded from Buddha's time to now. For those of you joining us for the first time, our guest speaker for this week is the Reverend Dr. Kenji Akahoshi. Reverend Kenji is retired as head minister of the Buddhist Temple of San Diego after 9 years of service. He now leads the ministerial support pillar for the Dharma Forward campaign and gives classes for the ministers' assistants of the Buddhist Churches of America. He has had recent articles in Tricycle Buddhist Magazine and Lion's Roar. He is also writing a book which interprets Shin Buddhism in a way that is relevant in 21st century America. A dentist by profession, Reverend Kenji earned a doctorate degree from the University of California at San Francisco Dental School before finishing his master's from the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, then a master's from the Institute of Buddhist Study for the Ministerial Path. Please welcome Reverend Dr. Kenji Akahoshi.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Let's begin by Nembutsu Gassho. So if you can put your hands together. Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, Namanda. Thank you very much. I enjoyed last night, and I hope you did too. And I do have some questions as far as what we were able to find out. What was nice is Dexter emailed me saying that I maybe should make it clear as to what my intention is for the week. And I guess I didn't state it very clearly, but what I have been observing over decades is that Jodo Shinshu in America has a lot to offer. And yet what I've been saying is that the methods we've been employing doesn't seem to be working. Not only are we not bringing in new people to our temples, but the ones who have been here, who have grown up in our Dharma schools and YBAs, are no longer attending very many activities. And so I see this as a condition where it's the methods that we're communicating. And one of the things, and I know former Bishop Yamaoka has stated this, in Japan, you don't have to explain very much because Buddhism has been in Japan for almost over 1,500 years. And so it really has blended and influenced the culture. And we'll get into that also. But in America, it's very strange. And what we're trying to do is interpret it. And when we say religion, Christianity seems to be the basis. And so often people are confused by the way we present it. And so I thought by presenting a contemporary interpretation from the viewpoint of what we know now, not only from science, but from modern psychology, it would make more sense. Now, I realize this is incremental. It will take some time, but it's taken a long time for us to learn what we know. And in my background in psychology, I know it takes a lot of time and effort to change ideas. But anyway, this is what my presentation is. And it is so that members can take what I'm saying. And actually, I do have a plan on during the week as far as a path. And we started with this exercise because I think what's primary is a practice, which I think we're somewhat unclear in America. But by following this path and ending up more on the spiritual side and kind of designating the different levels of understanding we have, hopefully you can all appreciate it at your own level, whatever level you're at, and share it with your children, newcomers. But instead of relating a doctrine, that you're relating how Shin Buddhism has affected your life, the benefits you have gained from attending or being part of a Shin Sangha. And I think that's what people want to hear. So that's my intent. And initially I started out with practice because I'd like to know what some of the experiences were of people who may have done that. Yes, actually today, perhaps last night and today. So can we start off with sharing? We had, asked people to think of an item they could, consciously say thank you toward.
Okay, I tried it. I guess my first experience was trying to remember to do it. And water was the one I picked. And so, of course, I had several opportunities during the day to express gratitude to the fact that I had water so easily accessible. But that was my first experience, was trying to remember to do it. So it was kind of hard to get the habit going. But then later, it helped to trigger sort of a cascade of kind of going up the line, I guess almost like following the pipes up the line, a cascade of other things to be grateful for that are all connected to water. Maybe a water system is a good example of a very tangible network of connections. So I started to get that out of it.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? And actually, why it may have been difficult to do this. Just want to hear what people's experiences were. Terry? Yeah.
Well, at first I forgot to do it because I was trying to go and pick up my girlfriend for her doctor's appointment. But then I chose something that already I really love looking at. So I have an Aura, which is an electronic picture frame.
Okay.
So all my favorite pictures are on there. So I look at it all the time and it always makes me happy, So I didn't realize, so I was gone most of the day. I came back home and I saw it. I turned it on again and I would keep looking. I went, I look at it a lot, and then, so it's always made me very happy. It's always brought me joy, to look at those old pictures. But now I went a little bit deeper and said, all the things behind all the things that had to happen for me to go on that trip, or my granddaughter, like surviving being a mother to her mother, and then now I get to be a grandma, So even the blanket that she was lying on, like who made it? And I kept thinking of my mother and my grandmothers, and and so I think the joy was deeper as I looked at. I used to just look at it and smile and kind of remember where I took the picture or where the picture came from, but now it was a little bit deeper. So thank you.
Okay.
Share.
I think I chose hot water, and because I like to take a shower in hot water, and I realized that just we have the water readily accessible, but it's also the heat that makes it hot, and there are lots of other people that were involved in making that, producing the energy that creates the heat, but also. So in a way, it's all these different people that come together to give me all these things that I have. Hot water, electricity. So all these things that we take for granted, we don't really appreciate, but I think if you stop to think about it, there's many people that were involved to
Yeah.
make your life more comfortable.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone want to share why it was difficult to actually remember or to do this? Life got in the way. Okay, and the reason we start with this, and the reason I think it's so important, this practice, as I said yesterday, when we talk about things, I'll be lecturing this next hour on how to lose 50 pounds, and I have very, great information, and I'll talk for an hour on that, okay? And, what you should eat, how you should exercise, and, what you should think about. And when you go home, if you don't do these things, are you going to lose 50 pounds? But this is the same, if I were talking about playing pickleball, which I know nothing about. But I could talk about doing something, but if we don't go home and actually do it, it stays in the mind. It's a concept. And that's how I think Buddhism in America has been. Because we talk about it and we get these bits and pieces and we say, oh, that sounds good, maybe I'll say Nembutsu every now and then, or, when the time approaches. But in Japan, as I said, we're influenced all over. It's really all over in the culture. And as an example, if I were to ask you, how are you? Or if you were to ask me, how am I? I would say, I'm great. I do Tai Chi, I do my exercises and so forth. I'm great. How would I respond in Japan? If I were to ask someone, Ikaga desu ka? How are you? What would the response be? Okage de sama de. Because of you and everyone else, I am fine. So every encounter is, it's in the culture. Thank you. Because of you, I am fine. Instead of, let me tell you how great, my exercise is. And so this is why I really encourage people to do this and know that these are all these things. And there are many things that I know about that I don't do. But just starting, because our practice is Nembutsu. I could start off saying, okay, go home and do Nembutsu, 10 times a day. And yet what we're trying to develop is a pattern, is a practice, is a habit. And what happens, because we've used this successfully at different places, at different temples, and what it does is it starts to shift our mentality. And of course we forget, telling our kids, say itadakimasu before you start eating. And usually it's itadakimasu, just a quick thing. But if we can develop this pattern of being grateful for all these little things, conveniences, necessities every day, it starts to change our perspective of things. We don't have that slide here, but so that's why I think practice is so important. And it may have seemed a little vague, but that's why I like to start with this. And we'll go progress through the week. But what I'm actually doing, which is unusual for American Shin Buddhism, is developing a path, a way to do things. When people ask, what do you do? Well, you should be kind. We could set out a kindness pattern. Be kind to someone every day. How would you know you're being kind? It's kind of hard to get feedback. But when you say thank you, there's a connection. There's something that someone has offered you and you're saying thank you. And so I find that this is the easiest way for people to realize that it's a daily practice. And it's not just some idea. It's something we do. It changes our perspective, and it starts to change our heart. It changes the way we see things and the way we live. So that's what that was for. And you might also do that other exercise that we started, where you realize all the influences you've had to get to any part of your life. It might be your career, might do it again on, being a parent, maybe it's something in your social life. All these different things that we've accomplished are not our self-effort, but a whole bunch of effort of others. And I'm using the term effort of others in lieu of the term we've used, other power. Other power has, it's not a common thought in America. And I'm using effort of others kind of in place of Amida Buddha, or Amida's compassion, which again is unfamiliar. But when we talk about the effort of others, that's an everyday thing. So we kind of remember our neighbors or friends, relatives who helped us. So that's what that whole exercise is about. So now we're getting into an easier topic. Let's see, let's have two, what is that? Oh, okay. I don't know if I can read that. Okay. Right. Yeah, thank you. Right. It's just the person is enjoying the garden, if I'm reading this correctly. And not only is it the flowers, but that involves the sunlight, water, the gardeners who maintain it. And again, all these things are there. And so it's great that we acknowledge that. And it's great if someone does something for us, we thank them. And right away, we get a response. They feel good, we feel good. There's respect, humility, much of that. So let's go to slide 2. Okay. And I'm using this as a contemporary version of becoming a Buddha, because what Siddhartha Gautama did was in his enlightenment, he realized that there was a truth, and it was a natural truth. And so when he realized that his self, his ego, the way he looked at things was getting in the way, he realized that to align his mind, and here I think we could use the word being, B-E-I-N-G, his whole being, to align with what was true, he reached harmony and joy. And when we go against what's natural, then we suffer. And so he didn't base suffering on the demons and the, good fortune on the good gods, but on what happens on all things on earth. And so we'll look into that a little more. So today the 3 topics are simple topics are truth, Amida, and Nembutsu. And we'll see if we can cover that. But again, we'll just present some things, and I want it to be a discussion because I want to know what people feel about these different things. Now, as far as truth, what is truth? If I ask that question, it's kind of a trick question because it's all around. We can answer it many, many different ways, and it's vast, broad, it's everything, and we can have great arguments about it. But I think one way to help us, because when we do have these talks and discussions, sometimes we mix things up, whether we're talking about life and death matters or just conveniences, if we're on a conventional scale or kind of a deeper scale. So I want to see if this is true. Anyone see the sunrise this morning or sunset last night? That happens every day, right? So next slide. I don't see the sunrise very often. I see some sunsets. But this is conventional life, right? And everything works around this. Commerce, all around the world. We're 3 hours later than California time. Things are synchronized. Air flight is, based on this. Everything is based on conventional life. So it's true. Is there any disagreement with that? So that's one level. And yet there's another level we don't think too much about. And the next slide. What about, is this true? Now, do you see the Earth? It's right there. And it's around that sun, that particular star, but that star is in this galaxy. And apparently there are 1 billion stars in that galaxy, the Milky Way. And I can kind of get that, 1 billion stars. But then I understand that there are 1 billion galaxies. I don't quite get that. But, now they have the telescopes, not even the Hubble, but the James Webb telescope getting pictures of these things. Is that real? Or is that, made up? This is real. So why are we so concerned when this is real life? This is real life. And we're concerned about that other sunset, someone didn't deliver my mail on time and so forth. And yet I think the Buddha intuitively was aware of these things without a telescope, because he talked about many Buddha lands and Buddhists in each land. But again, it was hard for him to explain things when he didn't have a telescope and these kinds of pictures. So at the time, he had to explain it in mythical terms and stories. And I think I'll get to this later. This, vow we have. Are we at the temple of Amida Buddha? Or the temple of Shindan? We are the temple of the primal vow. And I think that's where this comes in, and we'll talk about that more on Friday. So this is a reality, but we don't, talk about it too much. But if we didn't have this reality, we wouldn't have the Zoom. People who are zooming in, our cell phones would not be working because we got satellites, going around the Earth, GPS. All of that is due to the reality that we're not having the sun rotate around the Earth, but the Earth is rotating around the sun, which is rotating around, I guess, some other stars and so forth. So there is this deeper reality. And so for our purposes, I'm just thinking about truth at two levels. Now, it's kind of hard to talk about these things and bring it down to the level where we're living every day. We could leave that up there. So I like to think about, and often the ocean is used as a metaphor for truth, right? Reality. So the ocean is truth. And the way we perceive it is that we're in a submarine and we're in the ocean and we have a porthole in the front. So I look out the porthole and you see the fishes and things on the bottom. And so I know about truth. It's there. And what I see, I think I know about the whole ocean because I have this porthole and I can see it. But that's about the level of our understanding of truth. And if we didn't have a telescope like this, we wouldn't know. Now, as Shin Buddhists, we do have that porthole in front. But the reason it's a little different is that we have a porthole in back, and we're looking at the back. And we only have a little sliver of reality, but our reality is, how did we get here? How did we get here? And this is what we talked about yesterday. And the reason I'm putting it this way is that yesterday, I was hoping that exercise would show and demonstrate for each one of us in an exercise that we may have an assumption of my achievements. But the truth of the reality is that we were receiving all this. And so in this porthole in the front of the submarine, I think, I know about, the ocean, and I'm going out there now accomplish some things. But by looking at the back, even if we have this small sliver, I appreciate the reality, the fact that I'm here. And as we said yesterday, it took all our relatives, for us to be here. And not only our relatives, but all the supporting cast of teachers and just everyone. And this is, again, where this practice of saying thank you brings us to mind. It shifts our reality. And this is a little extreme to say, but one of the reasons I think we're having problems in life are that we're not living by what the Buddhist truth is, what he taught. And this gets a little complicated, so I'll just gloss over it. But we have this whole issue of duality, right and wrong. And the Buddha says you have to have duality. We talked about balance. I could say, live a balanced life. And it wasn't until we stood on one foot that, a balanced life is a little difficult when you practice it. Well, duality, it's either right or wrong. And you have wars and fights to decide that. But whoever wins, it's unbalanced. And what the Buddha talked about is wholeness. You need that other side. You can't have a competition without that other team. And so we're living under some assumptions like I achieve things, but the reality is that I receive things. And that this duality of being right is a system that, in a sense, doesn't work, that we need to accept that other side. There needs to be humility. So again, there are these two levels that I'll be pointing to, that as we advance in our technology, our knowledge, and begin to realize that there is a deeper truth, that there is a thing we might call wholeness oneness. We're using different words to describe indescribable phenomena, but that's what I think we're trying to do here. So this is where, again, not only looking back, but this is where I think gratitude comes into play, because this really hits our heart. And this is the human part of us. And this is more than, just saying, oh, look, this is a fact. It hits us as humans, as compassion. So can we have a discussion on this? What are our thoughts about truth? Does this resonate with people? That there are these levels, and for our purposes, we can talk about two different levels, because when we do have discussions and people talk about war or some of these very deep issues, that we want to realize, is this a conventional thing we can talk about, and we're going to have discussions and we could have debates, and then there's this deeper issue that sometimes we talk about, is there heaven or hell? That would be a deeper kind of issue. So do you see what I'm saying? There are these two levels, and oftentimes if we talk about them as if they're the same thing, but if we split them and realize that we can talk at different levels, then we might be relieved. In other words, it's hard for me to argue about this level. I'm not too much of an expert on, why we're that little speck. Why aren't we a speck on that other side? Maybe there is this other thing. Well, that is kind of an inconsequential question. I need to have answers on this practical level. So any comments on this? Yeah.
Some people would say that that's not real. It's somebody drew that picture.
Yeah.
So how would you, what is really truth?
Mhm.
And I'm still not clear about the two levels of truth.
Mhm.
Can you explain that?
Okay. For other people, it's whatever everyone thinks. We talked about many religions being about belief, and that's very strong. And I'm not about trying to convince people out of their belief. I think Buddhism has this attitude that he presents truth, and you either go with the flow, as I said, you ride the horse in the direction it's going. You do what is naturally true, and things work out. If you go the other way, it doesn't work out. I'll do a little exercise here in a minute. But I don't know about other people who, think this is false, and there are other things that people claim are false, false fake news and so forth. But it's for each of us. And as I said, this may not be true, but somehow we have Zoom, we have internet, and that sort of thing. And so if we lived on a flat earth, that wouldn't happen. And it took some religions a couple of centuries to catch up. But again, if we're living by what the Buddha talked about, and it's not that Buddhism changes its truth, it's just that we reach a different, deeper level. And at some point, we'll reach a deeper level. So I don't know if that helps you. It's just that I'd like to make a differentiation, because there's a level that it's very difficult to debate, to talk about, and that's this level. And if someone says it's false, that's fine. But how do we perceive it? Because this is what I'm getting into with this sort of thing, is our practical, conventional life and our spiritual life, which again is a little hard to talk about and validate. It's kind of not able to touch that or see it. But that's why I present it in this way. So maybe it'll become clear when we talk about some spiritual issues.
Maybe that picture, you can say, is it real? Or on one hand, was there a spacecraft that went that far out of the galaxy that it took a picture?
Yeah, that's probably the Hubble. I don't know. Even from the mountain here in Hawaii on Big Island, they've taken these pictures. Yeah, because I have a friend who he bought some very expensive equipment, but he's taking pictures of stars, at his home with expensive cameras and the computer and all that. It's his hobby now, and he says his wife doesn't know the expenses, but you can buy these expensive cameras that look out into the sky and take these pictures on a regular computer.
Kind of reminds me of one of the Apollo
Yeah,
flights that went around the moon.
yeah,
And then as it came around, it took a picture of the
Oh.
Earthrise.
Yeah.
And so
yeah,
that is real.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm interested in where you're going with this, and I don't really understand where you're going with this. I would say that, truth is a fundamental principle. It's something that is a basis absolutely for Western culture. So Western culture, if you trace it to the Greeks, the pursuit of truth was maybe the ultimate goal. So that's where, for example, the Socratic method comes from. I think that with respect to Buddhism, the most famous Buddhist in the world right now is probably the Dalai Lama, right? And he spends a lot of time talking about truth in terms of science, and he embraces it. I would say that I don't have that much experience with Hawaii Honganji, maybe 9 years now. And I would say that from my point of view, just to speak the truth, right? And sometimes truth can be provocative and thought of negatively, that it's not, and actually countercultural to what Hawaii value is, which is always to say nice things, okay? But I would say that my experience with the Sangha in Hawaii at Betsuin is that there isn't a search for truth. In fact, people stop thinking. I think about my father, who was not, he was not Buddhist, but he would make a comment that, oh, get rich, get fat, stop thinking, okay? So I think when people are comfortable, like I think that the Sangha at the Betsuin is really comfortable. Like people go there, and credit to them that, they enjoy each other. But I don't see a lot of effort to think more deeply about all of these principles. And I think maybe that's what you're driving towards.
No, it's for each of us. It's not to judge what other people are doing. But what I'm trying to present is whether this informs you. I think what a Buddhist would say, and I think what Shinran is saying is, I don't know. And this brings up the parable of Shakyamuni saying, if a man is shot with an arrow, is he going to discuss, oh, is this a willow tree or an elm tree? Are these duck feathers or goose feathers? No, we're hit. The arrow in me is that I'm going to die. I think I have less than 50 years. No, I'm very optimistic. But so we talking about these kinds of things, and this is what I'm saying. Truth is what each of us perceives it is. And we all may have a little porthole and say, I know truth. But what I'm saying is it's like the ocean or it's like this. And that's why I talk about two levels, that there's a level that is difficult to talk about. So we, in a sense, we don't. But it's hard to judge what other people are thinking. And it's our perception of, why people are doing or not doing what they're doing. But for Buddhism, it's for each of us to, see what we're doing. And that's why introspection is so important. Tomorrow, I'll talk about the self, and that we talk a lot about Buddhism, but we don't talk very much about the self, except, the evil passions and the bombu, that sort of thing. So we'll talk about that. But because there's truth out there, but as I said, it's our perception of truth, and that depends on my eyes. If I'm colorblind, I'm not seeing things clearly. And so anyway, so there's two things. There's truth out there, and there's our porthole. And if our porthole is colored green, everything looks green. So does that help to explain?
I think it helps explain where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Hopefully I'll get clear as we move on here. Yes, Jen.
So
there's truth, experiential truth, like two people can see the same thing. You're going to get
Yeah,
two different versions. They're both true.
right.
And you're talking about getting way beyond that and deeper.
No, I'm just saying that know that you have two different versions of the truth.
Okay.
And it's usually because I often put something out here and ask people, you know, where's the front of this? And for you, you'll say, this is the front. Someone else will say, no, it's got lettering on, you know, the front. And so each of us has a different view of reality. We have a little different porthole.
It's like,
And,
like the blind man and the elephant.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So we're trying to describe the ocean as an elephant, and we each have a different part. And so as Buddhists, we realize that and accept the others as having a different view of the ocean, of the elephant, of whatever it is. So again, that's at one level. So, let's see. So the question, truth on a day-to-day basis is very fluid. Yes. Campaign, should we look at the Buddhist conversation to look for truth? That is hard. And a Bombu to figure out the truth. Right. So tomorrow we'll talk about Bombu, you know, the self. So if we can, you might ask that tomorrow. Toxic positivity is a biased culture here, but for West in general, I'm not sure what toxic positivity, what is meant by that. Okay, and then truth in Buddhism is, as I live my life for over 7 years, is the nature of things. Dharma means nature. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is there's truth out there like the ocean, but each of us has a different porthole. So I think we can accept the reality that we each have a different view of reality. So that's the point. Yes, Terry.
Is there something called universal truth where it should be true for everyone?
In a way, I don't think so.
So it is also individual.
I think so. You look at that, you know, what's the truth of that? I don't think any of us could explain it.
Well, it's there.
Yeah.
So that isn't that universal? Everyone should be able to see that it's there.
Okay. You can accept that, and someone else could say, no, I don't accept that. So, again, it's just our perception of what is true. That's our reality. And that's what I'm saying in that, you know, aligning our mind with truth. And I'm trying to describe truth here. Terry, yeah, sorry.
I mean, I get what you said, that everybody has a different view and an opinion and a belief system that tells them what is true and what is not true. I think what's harder for me is, like, as I've changed, as I've grown, or as I experienced more things or met different people or whatever, my truth changed. And at first that alarmed me. That scared me because it showed that I'm kind of wishy-washy. I don't know my own belief system. But it seems like as I grow older, it's like I'm more accepting of the fact that my truth changes. And so I guess I'm more able to accept other people that have a different opinion. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yes.
but as I grow older or I experience new things, then I see things differently.
Yeah.
And therefore what I believed in has changed.
Right.
My truth.
That's kind of the point I'm making. So as another example, love. Has our opinion of love changed from a 10-year-old, from an 18-year-old? Well, I really knew it at 30. And then at 50, my opinion of love changed. At my age, I have a different view of love. And so you can see it in children in grade school, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. They're sure of something, next year it changes. And it slows down somewhere in the 20s, I think. And for some people, it stops. And that's what we'll talk about. But yes, that's what I'm trying to point out, that our perception is what we regard as true, but it is just a personal perception. And we can become more tolerant when we realize that everyone else is in a different porthole. The guy next to me looking out his porthole has a little different degree. Okay, Dorothy.
Well, I think in our lifetimes, even there are things that we have discovered or come to learn that have changed over time.
Right.
And so I think Buddha and Buddhism gives us a possibility or teaches us that as human beings, we can be mistaken or we can learn new lessons. There are things that we have done for a long time to correct something, and then we later realize that that really wasn't wasn't correctable, or
Right.
our treatment wasn't
Mm.
really addressing the problem.
Right.
I mean, even something like homosexuality,
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
for a long time, we thought it was in the mind,
Yeah.
or that you could make them normal by, well, brainwashing them or something. We know much more today. We
Right.
know much more about genetics and the effect and so forth. So there are more things for us to discover.
I think that's what the Buddha is saying, that truth is out there and it can be very deep. To give you another example, I was talking with a dentist friend who's much younger. He was in our study group. And I was telling him, I went to school in the dark ages where we didn't wear gloves. Once we had magnification, we thought, wow, where did these things come from? I can see things now. And so, and the things they're doing in medicine now, Dr. Horn knows, we don't change. It's just that the reality changes and we could see more. So that's my point, that for Buddhists, we accept this reality is, our reality is how we see things. And so that changes in time. So I want to get to Amida Buddha, another easy topic here. What's the truth of Amida Buddha? So at the time, and the reason I'm doing this, at the time that the Buddha was enlightened, everything that was not known was kind of attributed to gods or demons or mythology. And so he couldn't go out and talk about things the way we talk about. And so we have images, and we have this image of Amida with the light, usually behind him and standing, and the pose has different significance. And we've gotten used to that because in our altar, we have, a statue, a picture, or the Chinese characters, Namo Amida Butsu. And Renyo recommended that the Chinese characters were preferable, I guess, because we don't have this human image. And then a picture, and then thirdly, a statue. But we've gotten used to this. Now, when Shinran was writing, this was 800 years ago. So that was still at a time where he was referencing in writing, energy or actions attributed to Amida, kind of referenced as a deity. And that, to me, as a 21st century American, kind of doesn't fit quite right. And for many of us in America, with Christianity, we get this image of God. And I think in that image, God controls a lot, and you have to, behave in a certain way. But so what I'm trying to present now is a more up-to-date rendition of what Amida Buddha might be, how we might realize. So let's see. The Buddha said, again, he's describing the workings of the life and truth in terms of what was known at the time. And so he said this, everything is impermanent. And then I'll talk about this and then we'll see the slides. So let's have slide number 5. And then impermanent means that things change. And it means that I'm here and I may not have 50 more years. That scares me. But the other thing he said that's a little harder to see is that everything is interconnected. Interdependence. Now, he's describing it this way, and we'll see. Well, let's read this, and then we'll see the next slide. But the interdependence is not really what he's saying. it comes from the thought of anatman, no self. And no self is a little difficult to kind of realize because how do you have no self? Well, yeah, if you could do the next slide. Now, anicca is impermanence. Everything changes and we can see that. Anatman, no self, is a little hard to see. But what he's saying is that nothing is separate. Everything is interconnected. And now we see that's true in terms of molecules, atoms. You know, we know things change, oxygen to carbon dioxide. You know, I talked about our plastics being very convenient, and it comes back to us little bits in our sushi. And so interdependence is a little more difficult to see, but it's a reality. Everything is connected. A gross example would be COVID. You know, we're all connected with the air we breathe. And so these are two realities, two aspects of reality that the Buddha described. Now, the question is, do we agree things, everything changes? And then can we agree that we're all interconnected or things are interconnected? And then the question comes up, why do things change? Why do things change? Well, fortunately, there was a very smart guy about 100 years ago. His name was Einstein, I think his name was. Yeah. And he says, energy makes things change. And he said that all forms, everything, and the Buddha said everything is, impermanent, everything changes. Einstein said it's energy because all forms have mass and energy. Now, I have a science background, so that makes sense to me. I was talking to my wife. She said, "You can't talk about Einstein." Because I first started out having E equals MC squared, and she said, "You're going to freak people out." So I don't use that anymore. But this guy named Einstein did say that everything has form and energy. And so how did Buddha talk about energy? The next slide is not what we is truth not what we choose to accept? I don't know. There's I don't think, again, I think truth is that ocean and we just have a small bit of it. And so we accept some parts of it and we kind of deny other parts of truth. So, okay, so the Buddha said, yeah, there's impermanence, what he called iniya. And this is where in Buddhism we think the only reality is right now. Now, a minute ago, that's our past, that's in my brain. A minute from now, that's in my brain also. But the only reality is right now. And this is why the present is so important. And then the other thing, anatman, no self, no atman, is interdependence. And basically all he's saying is that everything is connected. That means we're all connected, even if we're not relatives. So there's no separate soul, as is referenced, I think, in Christianity, where you have this little bundle of energy, that, and that's the question of incarnation, reincarnation, and such. But the Buddha is saying, no, it's, that doesn't happen quite like that. And so, what did he call the next slide? This energy. Well, Einstein said that everything has two forms, and we talk about mass and energy. But for humans, we can say body, and we have this other word, spirit. The word spirit is a little iffy. People have different ideas of what spirit is. Is it Casper the ghost or what? But anyway, so we have to get used to some words because they carry kind of a condition with it. But again, our body, the ego, is impermanent. And so I think we can think of it as an illusion. But spirit, energy, is interdependent, and that's true. So the next one, and he talks about okay, he described it this way. Energy, in Sanskrit, Amitabha is what? Immeasurable light. We use the human term wisdom. Amitayus, immeasurable life. So the Buddha described it in terms of light and life. In Sanskrit, it has these two words. The Japanese combined it. And what word do we use? In Japanese, with Amida. So Amida is what? Light and life. And we could say it's life and light or energy. So this is, again, trying to reframe our thoughts of Amida. It could be this human statue or picture or Chinese characters. But for our modern thought, could we start thinking about Amida if it's easier for us to accept as life energy, some form of energy? So what are thoughts on that?
I just saw on the slide the word spirit, and I think in one of our discussion sessions years ago with Dr. Bloom, it occurred to me, there is that energy, but what do we call it? And it seemed to me in English, the best word I could think of was spirit.
Yeah.
But we do not use that word
Yeah.
in Shin Buddhism.
Yeah.
There is no spirit.
Yeah.
But we use the word spiritual. But
Well,
anyway.
that's what I'm trying to get to. Is, we don't do some things like use the word spirit, because for some of us, spirit may mean that it's contained.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm using it in the terms of energy.
Oh, so it's not like a ghost.
Yeah,
hovering
this is
out
what I'm
there.
saying. Words are very limited. Each of us has a different idea of what that word means. And we have a different idea of what Amida means. And I'm saying Amida could mean spirit, it could mean energy. And we each might have a different, idea of it. Amida could be effort of others. Does that take energy? Yes. Effort of others is energy of other people helping us be who we are. So again, these words are limiting, and words are contained in a context. If I say the word football, do you all know what I'm talking about? Do you watch football on at the Olympics? There's no goalposts. They got this net, and they're not, throwing passes. That's called soccer in most of the world, and we call football, what the 49ers are. And so words are limited with our background, they're conditional. And so I'm not sure what we're going to call these things, each of us, but what I'm trying to do is show that we don't have to contain Amida Buddha in a human form. For some of us, this thought of energy, not in a little package, but this flow of life energy, life spirit, whatever we want to call it. And I had trouble trying to figure out what I should use. And you'll notice, later I'll have it down in several different ways. But I'm trying to expand things in a contemporary way so that when we talk to our children or others, that Amida isn't this other God besides Jesus that is in the center of our altar, that we say, Amida, please, I want to go to this Pure Land, because that's a common misconception because of the Christian heritage that the country has. So again, expanding our thoughts on what Amida could mean to each of us. And we'll have to find word or words that, describe that. And it could be different for each person. Okay. And then, so I'm going to go on to the third one for, let's see. Yeah, and then we'll break here. The third simple one is Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu. So we're hitting all the easy topics tonight. Truth, Amida, and Namo Amida Butsu. So Namo could mean I'm one with, or I take refuge in. I like Reverend Tsuji's definition of Namo meaning I'm one with. Amida, and we said it could mean life energy or life spirit. And Buddha has that thought of awakening. The Buddha responded to the passerby, Alpaca, I think his name was, are you a God? He said, no, I am awake. So we're alive, but we're awake to this, a unique character of the human. Animals don't seem to be able to do this. And we weren't able to do this 100,000 years ago, apparently. But about 30, 40,000 years ago, something called consciousness rose, and we had this ability to look within and make these judgments and thoughts. So this ability to be awake is something. So saying Namo Amida Butsu, and this is the point in Shin Buddhism, this is our practice. If we just say it and think, is it a please? I think it helps to say Namo Amida Butsu has this connotation of gratitude, thank you. And just by using the word thank you initially to have this experience, Namo Amida Butsu, as I'll explain later, has a far deeper meaning. But it's like going to college and trying to go to math. And you don't start off with calculus and algebra. You start off 1 and 1 like 2, and 2 times 2 is 4. And so we need to start off with something that we can relate to. And so saying Nembutsu is an expression of gratitude. For what? For us being awake. And what are we awake to? All the things that we may have discovered during the day as we turned on light switches, stopped at the stoplight, entered our car, doing whatever. So at temple, and this is why it's important to be at the Shin temple, we review this all the time. We have the 3 treasures, and I have just an altered version of it that I kind of made up. We say, rare, difficult, and wondrous is it to be born into human life. Now we're living it. Rare, difficult, and wondrous is it to hear the teachings of the Buddha. Now we hear it. You know, we awaken to appreciate our mind being aligned to this truth of the Nembutsu. The Nembutsu is saying, we are awake, we receive this. We didn't achieve it through deep thought, very shallow thought, but we finally are waking up to realizing that, you know, we don't have to go anywhere. Reverend Kubo said, you know, why not? The door is open. Why chase the Buddha? He's chasing you. We are receiving this. And yet our society is based on achieving something. So again, we're turning things in a different way. In the book, I have this little thing where I experienced, and maybe you did the same. I drove into a parking space, you know, next to a wall here. And there are cars, you know, next to me. And I went in, stopped, put the brakes on. And all of a sudden, it seemed like the car was still going forward. And so I, you know, pressed on the brake a lot. Well, I wasn't going forward. The car next to me was backing out. So I'm wondering, as Shin Buddhists, you know, we seem to be going in the wrong direction. We should be achieving, you know, wisdom. I should be sitting more in meditation or more than 10 times. No, we're right. We're receiving this. The guy backing out is the one going in the wrong direction. And yet I think sometimes we're kind of confused because it does seem like we're doing something different. Yes, we are doing something different. And to me, I think Shin Buddhism through Shinran, relating the words of the Buddha are what is true. And I'm trying to show through these quote scientific, or I don't know if it's scientific, but you know, more modern ways of thinking. Now, this Namandab, saying it all the time, and I'll do this in the second half. My grandmother and father-in-law and other, you know, older Nisei would often, you know, just say Namanda, Namanda at different occasions, you know. And Houston Smith wrote a book on Buddhism, and he has an afterword on Pure Land Buddhism. And when I read that, I thought, wow, this is the most accurate description of Shin Buddhism from a non-Shin Buddhist. And then I saw the footnote on the bottom, and it says, I'd like to give my gratitude to Reverend Tetsuno. And, oh, that's why it's so accurate. And Houston Smith had come to California after he retired, and he and Tetsuno had a dialogue at IBS in the 1980s at Addison Building, and I was there. And so they developed a friendship because he did live in Berkeley. Anyway, so in that book, Houston Smith relates that as a child, he lived in China because his father was a missionary. And he recalls that some of these older people would be, walking around the neighborhood saying something that sounded very similar to Naman Dao, but in Chinese, Naman Da Tat or something like that. And he says, now it's come full circle. And, he has a much more complete understanding of what that is. And so that's what I think we as Shin Buddhists want to get back to, this practice of Nembutsu, but having an experience that I think is more accurate to what Shinran is talking about. But to do that, I think we have to have a practice so that we incorporate it with our whole being, not just an idea. So with that, questions, we'll stop and have a little break. Oh, another hard question. The closest I received. Yeah, I guess everyone could read that. I guess people online could read that too in the chat. Okay, so I won't read it. But yeah, in forces of nature. And right, so in nature, this whole thing about middle path, everything in nature is in balance. It's got stasis. Oil, water, whatever you mix, everything kind of balances out. And, we were real smart and we took out, wolves and bears, to save the nice deer. And it turns out the deer were eating all the plants and changing the environment. So we reintroduced wolves and mountain lions and so forth. There is this balance. And the other thing is that there's another thing in nature called human beings. And so we need to learn, and because of this consciousness, because we have this thing called ego, and I'll talk about this tomorrow, we think about surviving me as opposed to you. If I don't consider myself part of everyone else, that's when we have problems. And that's what the Buddha talked about. So we'll talk about the ego and, the self. But yes, in nature, there is this light, there is this balance, and it is useful to be out in nature just to realize, this is how life is. And we're so smart, we enclose everything and we have an air conditioner that gives us 68 to 72 degree temperature and lights and so forth. But there is hope because I don't know how it is here, but in LA and the Bay Area, we used to have something called smog. That's what's terrible. Yeah, that's kind of cleared up. And people used to smoke all the time, and we didn't think about it. If you see some of those TV programs of the 1950s, what you get as a souvenir, you got an ashtray for someone, and that, and people are dying of lung cancer and so forth. So as humans, this consciousness, can go unconscious sometimes, but we can realize our part when we think of ourselves as interdependent, not only with each other, but with the environment. And we have this whole ecology movement, this whole thing about climate warming and so forth. So with that, anyone want to ask a question or have a comment?
Cynthia, I appreciate your effort, and I was trying to get onto your bandwagon. If we were to go back historically, with say with Gautama Buddha, I would imagine that well, we get the description that he was like a physician, so he wouldn't be going through your elaborate explanation of all these various terms, right? And the initial question is, why do I suffer, right? And then he gave a response, and so that's where I'm still at in terms of that basic question is, why does Alan Goto suffer?
Okay.
And starting from that point, then I think your explanations can begin to develop my definition of truth now. So that's one part of my question. The other is in one of our dialogues, my son came up with this kind of Sir Isaac Newton kind of description of interdependence and what's the other one? The interdependence and what's the other? Impermanence. He came up with the fact that these are like gravity. These are We experience them every day if we are, and you don't have to, I mean, be awake.
Yeah.
We experience these things just as an apple falls.
Right.
Right. And so it's a very simple, I mean, it sounds like a kind of Dharma school explanation of those two concepts, right? But it kind of hit me that I never thought about explaining interdependence in that manner, because you experience it every day. I mean, just the fact that the time you get up in the morning, so many things and people have affected your life.
Right. And we affect other people's lives. On that first question you asked, it is that, ride the horse in the direction it's going. And maybe I didn't say I'll talk about later, and especially tomorrow. I think the Buddha was the first psychologist. But anyway, that if we pay attention to our body, and I'll say this again tomorrow, the ego, we suffer. We have the three poisons. If we think about interdependence, others, that we are connected, then there's bliss. So I think that's one of the deep lessons of Buddhism and Shin Buddhists, that we are not separate, independent people. We are, in a sense, a group. And that's where that me, we comes in. And you asked about that yesterday, that we think, and it seems that we're me because we can see our body and we know we're separate here, sitting differently. But the reality is that we are we. I think I have this right. Okay. So, and that's a little more difficult, but tomorrow we'll see if I can make the point that we naturally think in terms of we in certain instances, and we can expand that.
Okay, let's take a break now. Let's all come back by 7:20. Okay, welcome back. It's Hawaiian time. It's around 7:20.
Actually, I skipped over a couple of slides that may be useful, in our talk, that instead of being so, kind of theoretical, this whole thing about energy, I think these slides may explain a little thing. When Einstein talks about all forms having mass and energy, and it's energy that animates and makes change. And one easier way to see this without going through a mathematical formula, what happens when a tree limb burns? What do you get? Heat and light. And isn't that energy? I mean, we burn gasoline and, different gases. Now, where did that energy come from? Okay, next slide. As a tree seed, it grew. And the tree seed, got light, water, nutrients, and it grew from a little seed into a small tree. And it kept getting energy through nutrients and water and sunlight. And it grew to a big tree with limbs. And so when we burn that limb, it releases that energy again. So what about humans? We're part of this earth. We start out as what? Babies. And where do we get our energy? We get it from mom's milk, water, sunlight, air, and we grow from little innocent children, and we get to be 2-year-olds. Yay! But then we get past that stage, and then we get to be teenagers. But we still take in energy. But as humans, we also get a different kind of energy. And that's what? Education, language, feelings, experience. That's part of what the energy animates our bodies. And so that's a description of what this light and life could be. It's energy, but as humans, we have this other kind of energy. And what are we doing now? We're exchanging energy. I was able to receive all this, and I mentioned yesterday all the great people that I was fortunate to be around, and I'm just trying to share some of that. And so it's this energy that we have that we've gotten from others. We got it from our parents, grandparents, and so forth, teachers, friends, And it's in sharing that. So this thing we call Amida or life energy, it could be theoretical, but it could be real in the sense of this is what we humans do. We don't want to burn our limbs, give light and life, but we do give it in form. And I say this as we'll get into our interactions with each other, because this is life energy that we're exchanging right now. That, we're getting comments from you and you're getting some comments from me. We're exchanging ideas, and this is just energy. As I say a word, pink elephant, I say that because some electricity energy in my brain, synapses are going off, and somehow the synapses are going off in your brain, more energy, and you get this picture, pink elephant. So it is this life energy. And what I'm saying is that is also what we could call Amida, light. And whether we call it spirit or energy, we'll have to find a word that feels comfortable to us. We're talking about words, the word changing, when it came to American, we say, oh, it's faith. That didn't work. Well, it's true and trusting. Yeah, that's closer. Well, that doesn't work. It's now defined, Shinjin is Shinjin. Yeah, word, yeah. So words has its limits, and we'll actually each have to find out what works for each of us. So any questions on that? Does that help the description of life energy or Amida as another way of experiencing life spirit or life energy? And then this last part, and it's a more of a story, but I start off because as I said, Nembutsu has many different meanings and experiences. Meanings might be an understanding, but experiences really take the whole body. And so I actually use some of this as a Dharma school talk, but basically what we're saying is that Nembutsu, whether it's Namo Amida Butsu or Namman Das, has that ability to wake us up, to have a switch, rather than having us going against, nature, let's say, just thinking about the self. It could switch, thinking about achieving, it could switch and have us realize we're receiving. And the Yokunin Saichi says, someone asks him, "Oh, Saichi, where is the land of bliss?" And he answers, "My land of bliss is right here." Where is the line of division between this world and the land of bliss? And he says, the eyes are the line of division. Again, he's saying it's our perception that determines where this pure land. And I use the term pure realm because that doesn't have so much of a connotation of a physical geographical place like land. Pure realm might be a state of mind that we can change. As he says, our mind sees this. So it's how we see the world, which is true. That truth is like the ocean, and we have a small little glimpse of it. And again, each of us may have a more expertise in one area or not. I can tell you a lot about teeth. I can lecture for an hour on your teeth. You probably aren't interested, but each of us can, have a little more detail in some specific aspect. So we all have different parts of knowledge over over the ocean. Now, again, I do this as kind of a story. Changing, using Nembutsu to change our way of thinking has this. Let's see what. Okay, next slide, number 11, I guess. I think this works. I'll ask the Dharma school kids, and when I give a Dharma school talk, invariably parents are in there, so I'm really talking to parents in a way. I didn't complete this, so some of the things I'll be saying in this story, it may sound like I'm talking to children. Yes, children. Anyway, it comes through as a Dharma school talk. But the three poisons are what? I have hatred, ignorance, and greed. Some other people use different words, sad. But anyway, stupidity, anger, and what? Stupidity, whatever it is. I know Tanaka uses that. Yeah. Anyway, this fits better for what I'm going to say. So ignorance, hatred, ignorance, and greed, hig. Now, by saying namandas, we might change things, our perception of things. Hatred, is when we don't like anything and, we're thinking of ourselves and we don't like things that other people might have. And so we might change that. And what do we change that to? Humility. And then we have ignorance. And ignorance is either not knowing or knowing something and ignoring it. And that causes us problems. And by knowing more, we can change ignorance to understanding. Namandavs, I realize I'm ignorance, I'll change that to understanding. And greed, wanting more and more. I can't understand how these billionaires could want more. I mean, what do you do? And some of the ball players, I guess they earn it, but ball players are, fighting over whether they should get 20 million or 25 million. I know there's a short career, but I'll take whatever. So there's greed. And by saying namandas, we might realize that there's a limit and we might change that to gratitude. So what happens to HIG? Next slide. Humility, understanding, and gratitude. And I guess it's better on the slide. I have a picture of that, but I think it's easier to see the slide. So anyway, hig, the hug. Now, I don't know what Higg is unless we add another G and talk about the Higg particle. But hug, yeah, that gets too scientific. What's a hug? I think Nembutsu could be a spiritual hug, And so I have this story that, may explain it, because when we're hurt, a hug can really help us. And if we're sad or lonely, but also we hug when we feel great and we want to celebrate, or if we're anxious, or we appreciate the past and we feel grateful just to be alive. So a hug among us humans is, very important, except for some Asian cultures. We bow to each other. You see some of these old Japanese or Korean dramas and, they're really upset about something, they bow deeper. But anyway, in our American culture, I think a hug is something that we cherish. Now, this story involves a little boy named Corey and his grandfather, and he's about 7 years old, and they did a lot of things together. And one day, Corey was running around the yard yelling, "Shazam, Shazam." That comes from my boyhood. I don't know if people know about that anymore. But and grandfather Ji-chan says, "Oh, what's Shazam?" And Corey says, "I don't know, but it makes me feel good saying it, Shazam." And so grandfather says, "That's good, but when you're older, that might sound a little silly. And I have a word that you can say that when you're older, you won't feel so bad saying it. And these words are kind of magical, like Shazam, and it's namandab, namandab." And Corey asks, what do those words mean? Aren't they the words at the end of the sutra? And Jichan says, yeah. And Corey says, oh, that means that the chanting is about to end. My grandfather said, yes, that's true. But he asked Corey, how do you feel when you first come into the temple and say namandabs? He says, well, I just say namandabs. He says, do you feel settled? No, I just say it. And he said, how do you feel after you chant, the whole chant, and you hear everyone together? Do you feel more settled? And Corey says, yeah. So he says, at the end of the chant, it settles us down. It has us, feel very good. And then we can say it 6 times. The minister can say it 6 times, we say it 5. But we can say it and really experience each one and really think deeply about it. And so that's what I think the namandabs at the end of the chant would be. That we have an opportunity to just be with each chant and experience that. And it's hard to explain, but it's more of an experience. and it makes me feel good at any condition. And, Corey thought about that. And then he thought about when he heard Ji-chan say it. Sometimes when they would take a walk and, they would come to a pond in a park, Ji-chan just would say, Naman doves, watching the birds fly and seeing the flowers and trees and so forth. And then sometimes when the family would get together, Ji-chan would just say flatly, Naman doves. And, Corey was, interested in that. And so he asked him what it meant. And Ji-chan said, well, as you get older, it will have a deeper and broader meaning. So with that, he gave Corey a big hug. And he did feel good. And one day, Corey fell down and skinned his knee and started crying. Ji-chan came over. And he said, oh, gee, does that hurt? Yeah. And he said, pain is a part of life. And sometimes, we have to endure pain. But he gave Corey a big hug and he said, did that help? And Corey says, yeah, it still hurts, but it helped. And then one day when Corey's pet dog died, he was so sad and filled with grief. And Ji-chan came over and gave him a big hug and said, Naman doves. And he says, it's okay to be sad and to cry. And things pass away. Things do die. And we have to accept things just as they are. But then he gave Corey a big hug and he asked if that felt better. And he said, yes. And then in junior high school, Corey did so well, he got an award at the end of the year for being very active. He was in a lot of clubs and things. And so when he went up to get the award, and afterwards, Ji-chan gave him a big hug to say, congratulations, we're so happy. And then in high school, Corey was playing basketball, and as he practiced, every time he made a basket at home, Ji-chan would say, Naman doves, and it was so often that Corey just kept hearing that. So when his basketball team won the championship and the group got together and had a big group hug, Corey just yelled out, Naman doves. It was quite natural for him. And it was kind of a yell of, celebration. And he realized that Naman doves could be yelled out or just said in a normal voice, said at the temple or whispered, or you can just think it. And it could mean a lot of things. Thank you, I'm loved, I love you, congratulations, I'm with you, I support you. It just says all these different meanings. And also it could mean that I'm just happy to be alive. And as a young adult, Corey once was called by his parents to come home because they said Grandpa was dying. And as he reached home, Ji-chan was breathing his last breath. And as he went to his bed, he could hear him saying, Naman doves, Naman doves. And as Ji-chan passed away, saying those words, Corey could felt this energy leaving his body and entering his own. And he just felt so sad. But then having this history with his grandfather and having this sense of being hugged by these words, he just felt calm and reassured. And he realized that this was his connection, that even though his grandfather had died and was no longer there present in body form, he was always connected with this Naman doves. And so that's a story that I think will expand our thoughts on what the meaning of this is. As we say, it's in a sense indescribable, but it does reflect many of our human experiences. And I think that's the depth of what Shinran is talking about. And it's essentially, and we'll have the next slide, oh, yeah, it should have been on while I was talking. And then the final slide on the right, ordinary life, we're saying thank you. And we're saying thank you for the gifts of life. And essentially, hopefully it'll lead to the spiritual, where Namo Amida Butsu or Naman doves is for the gift of life. And so again, it's a progression. This could be incrementally quite slow, but that's what our practice as Shin Buddhists is. And I think we need to reach this incrementally with a refined or a renewed definition of some of these terms mean. And it will mean something different in an American lifestyle, since we don't have that whole history of Japanese culture to reinforce. And so it is, again, not an alternative way of thinking, but just the entry level. And hopefully we can turn, with the help of the Sangha, those who attend, really reach a sense of being one with all and appreciating life at its most basic form. So with that, we'll close and then we'll have questions. So please join me in reciting Nembutsu. Gassho, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. So we'll open this up for questions.
Questions on Zoom?
Yes. Oh. Let's have a break. No. Let's see, what do you think divisions between people, community, Sangha around truth? There's those who look for a singular truth. Things can be truth. Formed by an understanding. Yes, I think the point I'm trying to make is that truth is like the ocean. It's so broad. And so to argue about it means that we each have a different porthole. And if you can't see the view in my porthole, then you're wrong. We have to honor what each of us is seeing. And the reason I have the two levels, and I'm sure there's more than two levels, but there's that conventional level, like you see the sunset, everything in the world runs on that schedule. And then there's that deeper level that's very difficult to talk about. And this is kind of afterlife and, again, this whole thing about truth. And this is, again, where Amida Buddha can be in that realm also, in the practical spiritual level and at that deep, deep level. And Nembutsu, I think, is that thing that bridges it. So I don't know if I'll mention it this time. Yeah, I guess I'll say, I don't know if people, maybe this group knows about the three bodies of the Buddha. And I used that once and most people didn't know that, but that space is what I call emptiness. You might hear that term. And what's emptiness? It's what the universe apparently is expanding into. Space is mysterious as it is, and apparently the space is expanding into something else that's not space. But to me, that's emptiness. Dhammakaya, we can't explain what that is. And the Buddha realized that. And yet we're at the level of Nirmanakaya, the historical Buddha who had a human body. And so how do you explain this to people? Well, we have symbols. And Amida is what is called Sambhogakaya, representative, that symbol of something we can't understand. So it's even hard to understand Amida. But this is not denigrating it, but it's like an American flag. People die protecting that flag, but it's a symbol for the country. It's not the country, but it's very important. Well, flags for many countries or many things. And so it is a symbol, and I'm using symbol in, I guess it's Tilak who says it's a sacred, it's much more than just a stop sign or a symbol like that. So Amida is representing, for us humans, since emptiness is whatever it is, we have Amida representing that, saying in that great space, somehow we humans are important. There's compassion in this universe, which is an unusual thing. And I'll try to expand on that Friday. So hopefully that helps. Next, are Amida's wisdom and compassion, like natural spiritual properties and gravity. Yes, yes, as I just explained, that universe out there is cold. Scientists can tell us about it, and there's this big bang and, give us explanations. But how do we humans end up in this? And that's where the larger sutra comes in. This, mythology of Dhammakaya making these vows and telling the Buddha at that time, okay, I'll make these vows and all beings will be awakened. And that's where it comes down to the human level. And so it is natural in a sense, and it's given to us in this story where mythology is very important because that's how we understand some of these truths. The science doesn't explain it. Science just says it's out there. Okay, hopefully that answers it. And Pete, sharing about spiritual hug and find myself watching news. Yeah, touching. Nembutsu 4 times the black. Right. Yeah. Thank you, Pete. Yeah, it helps settle us. The other thing that we'll talk about is that we're involved in this. We are affected by everything else, but interdependence means we affect everything else also. So I don't go with some of the assertions of some people that, okay, now we just sit in meditation, hope and prayers in a way. We are intimately involved with things that affect us and how we affect other things. And so I'm, in a sense, an activist in that sense, that I don't think we sit idly by. We not only save ourselves, thinking in terms of, what about my life, but all those around us. That's the kind of primal vow, saving all others. So yes, it helps for me to feel, at peace. But I can do something physically to, help that others feel peace. So is that it? Thank you, Pete. Other questions?
Any questions here? I like what Pete Doctor said about the hug. And I think for me, I only thought about Namanda outside of the temple is when there's something sad. Just happened this afternoon as I was leaving the house. I noticed there was a dead bird on our driveway. I was getting in my car, so I called my wife. It's a dead bird. You must have run over it when you came home. Can you please, take care of it? So I told her, Namanda. It just came to me. But I never thought about saying Namanda when I'm so grateful. As things happen, I guess I should think about it more. Namanda for this class.
We have a lot of symbols in our temples, the statue. But doesn't that cause confusion for us as well as newcomers coming into this temple?
What
So
confusion of what?
because the symbol, the Amida Buddha, it almost seems like it's a god, that we're praying to a god. And when you talk about the Pure Land, it's like we're talking about heaven. I'm going to go there. So when you have new people coming into this temple, or even people who are already there, they may have the wrong view of what this symbol represents.
Right. And that's why I'm saying there are other forms.
So
Even Namandas, there are various ways of saying that. And whether we change it or not, it would be up to, each of us in the temples. One thing I noticed in Japan when I was there recently, San Jose has a very traditional looking temple, and the altar is very traditional, like many other temples. But now you go into the Japanese stores, I can't think of the one, but everything's modern. Because our no kotsudo, it's very modern, black lacquer, straight. It's like, at the Jodo Shinshu Center. It's just very modern. And that's what they're, I guess, selling in Japan right now. Very modern looking Butsudan, simple, straight. And I think it's because our lives are so complex. That's what we look for. 500 years ago, when you're digging in the mud as a peasant, it was nice to see that the pure realm had the gold and flowers and so forth described, 2,000 years ago. So again, these are just images that help us get a sense of, where we're going. And I think tomorrow we'll talk about some of these things like wanting peace or something is kind of a desire, something we want, which may be good, but is it realistic? We want peace, but the reality is that there's, turmoil. And I think that's also what Buddhism is saying, what the Buddha is saying, that there is strife in the world. And our desire for just peace is kind of a desire of the mind, of the ego. So, and this is again, switching our thoughts. And some of the things I'm saying goes against, how we should be thinking of humans. But the world has always been, I was speaking with someone, the animal kingdom has always had strife. Not only are animals eating other animals and plants and insects and so forth, but you have groups of lions fighting each other, groups of wolves or whatever, and groups of humans fighting each other. So some of this is just basic to nature, and that's a thought we don't like to think about and we shouldn't be, promoting, but that's part of the reality of the earth and how things, are happening.
Promote activism? Like we come to these
I think so. But again, it depends on, people's idea of how active one should be. One thing that's difficult is for a small group of people to say our temple, for favors. This was true, I guess 50 years ago during the Vietnam War when temples were reluctant to go against this or that. Yeah. I think as a human condition, we could promote one fact or another, knowing that the true reality is conflict. But in terms of that conventional world, that we should promote peace and understanding and so forth. So again, this is the two levels. There's a conventional level, and then there's that deeper level where you just have stars circling around. And so by differentiating that, there's an area that we can't answer, and it just happens.
Any other questions? If there are no other questions, this concludes tonight's session. Let's look forward to tomorrow night. The topic will be, who am I in the world? Finding my authentic self. Thank you, Reverend Akahoshi, Bishop Umitani, Carolyn, Derek, Reverend Baba, Dave, for your efforts tonight. And if there are any questions, those that's watching by Zoom, please send an email with your question that can be discussed tomorrow night. And of course, in-person attendees, same thing. If not by email, you can bring your questions tomorrow night.
What I would ask is that people do try the exercise we talked about, finding something to say thank you toward. I really think it's important to have a practice and to see whether it works or it doesn't work. After a week, it may not work. So the answer would be try harder or try another religion. No, yeah, but the practice is important. Otherwise, oh, it sounds good, yeah. And then it kind of disappears. It's a concept. It has to be a practice, and the practice is Nembutsu, whether we start with, thank you, or whether we just go straight to Namandav, depending on your background. So I really encourage you to do that. And then the other exercise of really contemplating how we got here. We're not single. We're here because of the efforts of so many other people and other things. And that's part of what Namandav is responding to. So thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Okay. So, a final a question?
So, I told you I picked the Aura, which has lots of my favorite pictures in it that comes up electronically,
Yeah.
but then I only see it at home. And I thought, oh, maybe I should get two things, one outside of the home and one in my home, because I couldn't practice it the whole time I was away. So that's okay too, having more than one.
Sure.
Maybe your aura could also be when you're in your car and you're driving and look at the beautiful sky, the ocean. I mentioned to somebody I'm driving from leeward side over H3. And as I get through the tunnel and I see on the other side, beautiful Kaneohe Bay, the ocean, you can see far away the air station. It's just beautiful. Lucky live on the north side. Any other questions or comments? If not, thank you very much.